I'd like to reconvene the meeting now. We're under 10 point, we have a new 10.1. So we have Superintendent Blaine and Trustee Chair Ray will provide an update from their meeting yesterday with Minister Bernier.
So Superintendent Blaine and I met with the Minister of Education and the Deputy Minister yesterday to discuss. I've been trying to get a meeting for quite some time with them. He had mentioned to Trustee Higginson that he was reaching out to different boards throughout the province, so we wanted to establish a relationship inside of the ministry. So after some prompting for a while, we were able to get a meeting with him, and we discussed a couple different things. The first thing that he wanted to discuss was Nice, and he asked, how the kids were doing. I gave him John and I gave him an update on what happened with Nice. We thanked him for supporting us through that decision to bring our kids home, and for the government's role in bringing our kids home. Explained to him that there are kids who are still suffering today with struggles, and chaperones with struggles, and we're providing counseling for these people going forward. We talked about that. We talked about the vision for our district. We talked about our assets, and the assets that schools that have been closed, school pieces of property that we have. We showed him the asset plan that was presented to the trustees, and then we asked him about Rutherford. To be candid and frank, that was one of the discussion pieces, and they made no commitment one way or another to funding a new wing at Frankney. We asked them and told them that we needed a decision on this moving forward, in fairness to all parties, and encouraged him to look at it and give us an answer one way or another. We have put in a PIR. We are putting our new capital plan in very shortly here, and we explained that to him, and that was the extent of the conversation. It was just under an hour. And it was just more about forming a relationship. But those are the three things that we discussed. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Anything to add there?
No, I thought it was a wholesome conversation. He did ask some interesting pieces around our capital plan and how that's formulated. We also mentioned to him at that same time that in the new PIR, we've also had a new seismic rating for Rutherford, so he assured us that they would note on the capital plan the changes around that so that they could use that as part of their decision-making process. And we thought it was a fair reaction to it, and we also, he was open to thinking about, as Chair Ray said, around giving us an answer even to the type of, for next year, as to trying for us to be able to do some planning around that, and he was open to that. He was very interested in the business plan concept that we have presented, and he had lots of questions around that, and the bylaws around the closure piece and those types of things. So we updated both the deputy and the minister around those pieces of where we were. So they're very clear on where the district is as far as the process is concerned, and very clear that the district is very interested in moving forward in a cost-sharing way. As positive as it could be, it was there without committing to anything.
Any questions or discussion? Moving on then to what is now 10.2, to hear from Pete Sabo and Mike Ross regarding the capital plan.
Sorry, Chair, just before this presentation starts, I have to sign off now. I was supposed to be in another meeting half an hour ago, so.
Okay, well, thank you for calling in and for your attendance.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you. Tonight, myself and Mike Ross, the Facilities Planning Supervisor, would like to present a number of slides that outline the content of the 5-year capital plan for the school district. This is work that staff is currently doing, and we're preparing for our September 30th submission. This is the work we've done to date, and there's a number of variables that we want to work through. As Superintendent and Board Chair touched on, there are some key points of the plan that support past motions that we're going to need to work through a little bit. And then there's a couple of other additional bits of information that we think the board should be aware of. So we're looking for feedback and discussion on some of the plan tonight. The action sheet that goes with the motion is starting on page 43 and goes to page 45, and the motion at the bottom is to refer, or to the Business Committee recommends to the Board of Education that they approve the 5-year capital plan as presented for submission to the Ministry of Education. Of course, if the board makes any amendments, then we'll consider those obviously in our submission. Any changes to the plan tonight, then we'll put them in our submission. The following pages are summary spreadsheets that the ministry has asked us to put our capital plan submission on, and we'll explain that a little bit. You'll note that they're very difficult to read, and these spreadsheets are quite cumbersome. Mike has talked to the ministry about them, and other districts have complained that they're very difficult to work with, even as staff, let alone try and present them. So we have some information. We'll try to walk you through the key points, and of course, Mike can explain the details of the spreadsheets if we want to get down to that depth. So Mike and I will share the presentation tonight, and we'll just jump right on. Yep, jump right on.
This slide outlines the changes from last year's submission. The changes being that each program inside the submission has its own list of priorities. They've changed the format from the project, the PIR, and now they're using what's called the project request fact sheet. It's a much more cumbersome document that's prepared in preparation for submission with each project request. Only the projects that are in the first 3 years of the SMP, which is the seismic program, the expansion program, and the replacement program, require the project request fact sheet. Something else that's been added is they've got a column in some of the forms that outline if the districts want to contribute funding of their own to these programs. The school enhancement program, there's a maximum of 5 projects that we can submit with each what's called the SEP. The renovation category was present in 2015-16 is no longer. Those projects fall into the school enhancement program. And on top of all this, they've also announced another $20 million fund of school enhancement program funding that we have to scramble to get a submission in by tomorrow, which we've also included in this slideshow.
So staff continue to work on the submission, as I indicated. And so we're working on PRFS forms for projects, and as projects get closer to year 1, the forms get a little bit more detailed to the point of business cases. We'll speak about Frank J. Nay's business case a little bit in a moment, or the closure of Rutherford. Consultant reports, final project costings, ministry backup forms, and set prioritization, development, budgeting, that's all still ongoing, and it was up to the last minute, so there's some new information in here as well.
Yes. Myself, I'm fairly new to the district, and I've been working with the capital delivery branch. Damien Coldwell is our capital planning officer. I've been working closely with him on detailing some of the items that are inside the submission. I attended a webinar over the summer that basically went through the capital plan instructions and all the changes from the previous year. You'll see within the plan that we've tried to align some of the school enhancement programs with also the carbon neutral program to gain some synergies and share some cost savings. And in May of this year, we put together a SEP, an additional SEP submission, which in turn turned into 3 buses.
So the This letter, once we put this capital submission in, the ministry, and the process is outlined in the action sheet, I won't go into it, the higher level process. But the response will basically be next May, we'll get a letter from the ministry, very much like we received last year. Last year, we received some SEP projects and 3 buses. This letter either indicates the level of support and how the district can proceed on specific projects, or it will be silent on projects that in fact the ministry is not currently supporting. And so in this letter that came forward in May, or in July, they were silent on the Frank J. Nix. So we continue to do more work, and we'll talk a little bit about the work that staff have done to work towards the September 30th submission.
So this slide shows basically all the programs that are within the capital plan submission, the 5-year. The program in red is the one that I mentioned earlier. It's the additional call for projects that the submission is tomorrow, and these projects have to be complete by March 31st, 2017.
So the first spreadsheet, and I don't expect you to read this. This is the seismic mitigation program spreadsheet, and there's 4 projects on this. And go ahead, Mike. We'll go through one by one. So currently, the projects are rated in two basic categories: level of completeness with respect to how far along we are in the design, and the rating factor. So currently, H1's the highest, H2 is the second highest, H3 is the third highest of the high priority. Ministry is currently funding H1s and H2s when considering funding for H3s. So of the 4 projects, the first 3 are H2, the last one's Rutherford is H3, and that's a little bit of the discussion we're going to have tonight. So Pleasant Valley is essentially tender ready, so we're ready to request, and we have been requesting from the ministry a capital project agreement, which would give us the funding to move forward with that seismic upgrade. And so what we've done for the capital plan this year is we're updating the costing as requested by the ministry to make sure that we have the most accurate cost if they're going to consider funding. Okay, the next item is our new renamed Cedar Elementary, Arcata 7 School in Cedar. That one was rated an H2 for 2 blocks after the engineer had done the SBIR. They indicated, or the rapid assessment, they indicated that the gym and the 2-story block required some addressing. Provisional costs have been estimated at 5.1. However, staff have not had a chance to go through that report to determine exactly what it consists of. This will be a request to proceed to the SBIR stage, SPDR stage, which will give us more information with respect to the details of the project. The third priority is Solaire, and that's at the SBIR stage was completed. Budget's cost estimated of 2.9, and we're going to request permission to proceed to the next stage again, the SPDR. This one's not as high as Cedar because this is potentially affected by the central area study that the district is undertaking, which affects Solaire, Departure Bay, Dufferin, and a number of schools, to determine what ultimately in that area is the best solution for facilities. And new on the list is the rapid assessment was complete for Rutherford in June. And the rapid assessment is indicated that the 2-story block is H3. And the provisional budget, as indicated, based on the very preliminary rapid assessment, is $3.4 million. This is linked to the Frank J. business case, and we'll be requesting to proceed to the SBIR completion. Now, the interesting part about this is you won't see Rutherford show up in the SEP submissions, the SEP submissions. The SEP submissions aren't a 5-year submission, they're a 1-year only submission. So right now there's a board motion pending to close Rutherford, so we're not requesting any projects for the SEP. However, the seismic mitigation is a 5-year, and so if in fact Frank J. doesn't close, we put this on the 5-year list. And so I'm wondering if we want to discuss a little further the. So I'm going to pause there for a second and see if there's any comments or questions.
So just for clarification on this, you just stated that Frank J. closed, you mean Rutherford closed?
Yeah,
correct?
sorry, I misspoke.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Superintendent Blaine?
So, one of the reasons for the pause is that stemming out of a meeting with the minister yesterday was a board decision. There's also involved in prioritizing this, the board's decision around what they feel politically and best for the district at this point in time, the prioritization of the different projects. And so one of the things that we need to, as this meeting goes through and this information comes out, is whether or not we want to, as a board, wishes to prioritize in a different way than some of this is showing as far as seismic is concerned. There may be other circumstances that the board is feeling that move the priority level up or down, however they deem. And Mr. Sabo and Mr. Ross and myself can help the board walk through that if there's other questions later. But as they walk through this, you maybe want to keep that in mind.
Trustee Ray, did you have a
Yeah, I'd actually like to make a motion. And I'd like to make a motion that we move Rutherford to the #1 position as the priority list for funding from the provincial government, and I'll speak to it if somebody will second it.
second? Trustee Bob, second.
The reality is, with Rutherford, we're going to have a decision to make in a very short period of time. And if the school stays open, if we do not get funding, which, to be candid, I think, as we heard all today, is a long shot. If in fact we don't get funding, we need to find monies to bring the school up to speed. And I think that it should be the #1 priority of this board on this list, that become what we focus on with the ministry, because we are going to have to spend some money here. And if we spend it, if we don't spend it, if we don't get capital funding, we're going to have to find it somewhere else at the risk of other services or projects that we want to do in this district. So for me, I think it would be important that we move this to the #1 priority of this board, is to find funding for Rutherford.
So just as a point of clarification, when you say move Rutherford to the top of the priority list, are you speaking specifically to the seismic mitigation program?
I think that, as the superintendent said, there is a will of the board that we can show what our will when we present something to the ministry, that what we deem is the most important piece, and I believe that it is the most important piece. The fact of the matter is that school stays open. We need to find money to get it where it needs to be. And if we can't get capital funding for it, we have to take it from somewhere else. So I would propose that it is in the next 18 months, the most important building in our district that we're going to have to deal with here.
So point of clarity, this is a question just about what you're saying. H3 is not as important seismically as H2, is it not?
Superintendent Blaine?
If I
Or is
could-
H3 is worse?
So we can't change the seismic rating and state where they are right now, but what the ministry suggested is that there's a covering letter from the board that is endorsing a priority and suggesting that Rutherford would be or would not be. And if the board wanted to do that, that's how you would do it. It comes in a covering letter. You're not changing the order of this because the data shows this.
I'm just super confused because I thought Mr. Sabo just said that H1 and H2 are priorities with the government to fund.
Correct. So you, as a board, may suggest other options to them when you prioritize, based on your knowledge not only of seismic, but of your own knowledge of the building conditions and et cetera, and the needs of the district at this time. And so, as a board, you can make suggestions to the ministry to look at this other than the first #1 priority, because they may look at the #1 priority in seismic and use that as your priority list. You're suggesting that by putting a covering letter on a different priority list or a different priority, as a suggestion from the board.
I guess is the will of the board as what we see, just to add to the decision. Ultimately, they're going to make the decision. They will decide what they deem is most important, but I think there is a will of the board factor that we can bring to this. That's all I'm suggesting. And that if the will of the board, the number one will of the board, is to fix that school and put money into that school, so we don't have to take it from other projects that we want to do, perhaps it may not even mean anything, but it just shows what the will of our board is. And so that is the intent of the motion, to show what the will of our board is. And I believe that, if funding doesn't happen for that, it should be the number one priority in this district.
Trustee Versnich?
I was trying to get clarification.
Trustee Solomon?
So ignore me. Yeah, I think I figured it out.
So I'll support that, because what it is there's no doubt that a lot revolves around this issue with regards to our planning in the district, and whether or not we have an addition at Frank Nay and Rutherford actually does close. If that funding does not come through, we do have to make some decisions, and they're very important decisions, because we need to keep this. That isn't the only cost. There's a seismic upgrade of the building is one thing. There's other monies that's going to have to go into actually making Rutherford a viable school for a long period of time. So, but we can't just leave it. We've left the community hanging, and the district is hanging for a certain period, until a decision is made with regards to this. So, I think bumping it up. In the past, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that NDSS, the replacement of NDSS, has been number one. We have been told many, many times that we're not getting a new high school in any time soon. So this one, to me, takes priority for sure.
Trustee Rowley?
Yeah, no, I was just getting clarification of why we would want an H3 or an H4 on our number one list. I'd caution the board against such a decision, and the reason why is now it's in the minutes. If ever there was an earthquake in one of those schools that were seismically more dangerous, we don't put an actual costing in for, then and have this bump something else, that's dangerous. I question the intent for it. I don't understand it. I think the Rutherford community deserves us to reverse the decision. That's a separate motion, right? That's not the motion we're talking about. But to bump it up to number one, I see the intent, but what it's doing is it's creating like an artificial fast decision. Whereas, like, we already know the government isn't funding H3s and H4s, so it's like a setup. It's, why are we asking for something we're not going to get? To me, I don't get it, because Pete just said that the government are funding the H1s and H2s, and H3 and H4 are we know what this government is doing. It's not fast on covering anything that it isn't required to pay for. So I would say, just based on safety, I wouldn't bump something up. Like if it needs to be on the list, it needs to be on the list. But my question, I guess, would be, if the number one on the list could supersede the H1 or H2 that's below, like, could the ministry then say, okay, well, we'll cover Rutherford, but that's it for your district? Then that would actually place us in a really precarious situation, because if there was an earthquake, those more dangerous schools wouldn't have been the number one on the list. So those families would actually have a very, very good legal case to sue for any damages. Like, I would really caution the board, because when we're talking about safety, seismic, we're talking about safety. So very careful. I would not. I'll vote against that till the cows come home.
Mr. Sabin?
The ministry has indicated that health and safety is one of their priorities, and seismic program falls in the health and safety. They've further indicated that they'd like to address the H1s and H2s first. They've also, there's a couple of factors. They also look to address projects that are ready to be addressed. They also work with districts to address priority projects that are important to districts, and depending on how funding is shared, et cetera, et cetera. And Frank, I can't speak, I'm not gonna speak to the safety rating and et cetera that trustee just spoke to, but Frank J. Ney is a complex project. And the condition of Rutherford and how we address Rutherford in the future and is very important to the business case. And the seismic upgrading of that school is it's rated as H3, but it's a ministry priority that will have to be addressed eventually. And so the replacement or the closure of Rutherford is the avoidance of a seismic upgrade. And it's a synergistic project with the Frank J. Ney as the highest priority for the board last year. And so sometimes, and the ministry is having some difficulty with addressing this business case as well, as has been indicated with the superintendent and the board chair.
So as a point of clarity, there's multiple opportunities to request funding from the ministry. So seismic happens to be one, but there's this other sort of $20 million deal where you can put in for projects. And I'm wondering, have we put in anything under that $20 million explicitly for Rutherford? Or is that something that the board needs to decide in terms of priorities? Because we could
Yeah, we're in a motion.
we could vote on this particular motion to move it up seismically, but is there another opportunity to?
The ministry, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I can say that the ministry considers seismic funding under their seismic funding program. They do not consider seismic funding under their SEP program. And if it's the board's will by motion to close Rutherford and put an addition on Frank J. Ney, then an SEP project for Rutherford may run at cross purposes. It may be confusing to the ministry why the district would ask for a SEP project this year for a school that they're in fact working on business cases to close. So I guess staff are suggesting that once the business case is clear, once the ministry's approval to close Rutherford and put an addition on Frank J. Ney to support that is clear or not, then we could look at supporting Frank J. Ney. Rutherford.
Oh, this is close. Don't forget a chance to close.
Sure.
If anybody else
Anybody
wants
else have a comment or want to speak to the motion?
I guess just to clarify if it's confusing, and I'm sorry if it is, the ministry are going to be the ones who are going to decide where the money's spent, not us. All I'm suggesting is that we say how important funding for this particular project will be to this district, because I can't say it enough. If we don't get funding, we are going to need to find money somewhere to upgrade that building. And I believe that that is the most important project that we have in front of us in this district. So I understand what you're saying, Trustee Routley, about the legalities part about it, but I think that will be for the ministry to decide. Again, we're not telling them how to do it. All we're suggesting is that to this district, this is what stands out as the number one priority for us. So that's all I'm suggesting.
Trustee Brennan?
Through the chair to staff, in capital projects, the ministry often, well, all of us likes it when districts come forward with some of their own money, and that was going to be the case at Frank J. Ney. Would that enhance, if this district could come forward with money to cost share the seismic upgrade of Rutherford, would that make a difference? Does the ministry require, or does it encourage those kinds of contributions from districts?
Superintendent Blaine?
As explained yesterday, and also they look favorably on it, and the proposal we put forward was cost sharing, and we also said at the end of the conversation, any negotiations around percentages of going both ways. We were open to, we were just asking for a little bit of an opening to enter into those conversations.
Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Trustee Routley is opposed. Moving on.
So the next spreadsheet are for expansion projects for the school district. And so the first project indicated as an expansion for Frank J. And the PIR light that was completed, separate from a business case, although forming part of it, had a budget of $4.9 million, including $500,000 below line contingency. The business case light was completed February 2016. We've done the rapid assessment. We're preparing the business case update with a with a building condition, a more detailed building condition assessment and costing to be submitted in support of the Frank J. Ney. That's due September 15th, and it's going to be submitted to the ministry in accordance with this previous motion. Hammond Bay Elementary, this is a historic project that goes back into the plan. This is to expand the gym to full size. The latest budget estimate was $853,000. The 10-year facilities plan calls for a high level of feasibility. We have an ask out with the city with respect to participation. The budget and scope require review, and it requires a PRFS light, which we'll be working on for submission for September. The next one is our highest school addition, third highest, and this is for Hammond Bay itself. And this is because the latest enrollment projections exceed capacity by 130 in 5 years. So it is the most over-enrolled elementary school as projected, current and as projected out 5 years. We've separated the two projects because they can be standalone projects. One doesn't depend on the other. However, typically the ministry does grant you an addition of this nature. They allow you to look at ancillary areas that don't meet standard and bring those up. So in a sense, de facto, the gym's included in this request as well as separate. Just for information, 6 portables on the site and what they're currently used for. The fourth one and new on the plan is Forest Park, and that's to increase the capacity because we projected out in 96 students short in 5 years. That'll be out in year 4, year 5, so there's not very much support required. This is basically giving the ministry the heads up that we have a school that's looking over enrolled in the future. It's got 3 portables on site, and that's what they're currently used for. I think it's important to understand as I finish this up that because we put them in the capital plan and because 130 students is our worst case scenario for an elementary school, that doesn't mean just province-wide that this falls under the ministry's radar at all. This is our 5-year capital plan, and these are our priorities as indicated by the ministry. We need to look out and see which schools need additions. However, everybody's heard it and they continue to say it. Mike McKay said it tonight. When you've got growth like you have in Surrey, it's hard to look at situations like we have here. So, however, one day the two shall meet and the ministry will look at additions to the school district. A new one on the request is a addition to Park Avenue, and again, 81 students in 5 years. And Cinnabar Valley, which was in the plan previously as just below Hammond Bay, drops a little bit because the other ones came up on the radar at a higher in the projection, and so that's 73 students in 5 years. Just some information on Rutherford. We have a building condition report that's been completed and draft. It's in for costing. We're expecting to receive that, as I said, tomorrow, and we'll be going through it for submission. It's going to talk about building systems and the renewal cost for that, and it's going to be used to update the PIR/business case for Frank J. Ney. And so that's looking at 40-year life cycle costing. And the previous business case indicated that on a 40-year life cycle costing, the option of closing Rutherford and adding to Frank J. Ney is significantly cheaper. And we're not sure exactly how this is going to be affected, but we believe it's going to show Rutherford, as we drilled down, we found worse conditions than what we had originally indicated. So we believe that it'll strengthen that case, not weaken it. An executive summary, as indicated by the superintendent, will be attached to the capital plan submission outlining our position with respect to the synergistic projects and how the seismic works in. The next one is school replacement projects, and this is very interesting because this involves only NDSS and this site. And so Previously, we had a request to replace NDSS on the same site and increase the capacity to 1,800. Staff are now reviewing that and recognize that the program requires further development. That we currently have around 400 surplus spaces at John Barsby, which is an adjacent school. The ministry is not going to look at an addition on NDSS when we have surplus space at a neighboring school. This one, staff are recommending drops down in the priority to year 5. We're leaving it on the ministry's radar. We want to leave it as a replacement, not an addition at this point, and let the ministry know in the submission that we are continuing to work on those elements of the plan, developing the program, working with VIU, working with the city, working with the educate and the master planning for the site. All of those leading up to a future project to address the condition of NDSS. The next one is again a synergistic project, and that is the district administration center. At some point, we will need a new district administration center. Where an NDSS replacement goes or an upgrade, it could affect the future location of a DAC. Again, it's way out in the future. We're doing a lot of development work. There's discussions about different locations for a DAC. It's not that high on the radar that we're looking for funding this year. It's a master planning item that's out in year 5. And the same applies to the maintenance yard. A new NDSS could be visioned on the site of the DAC in the maintenance yard. The maintenance yard will need upgrading and replacing at some point in the future, and that just forms part of the overall site master plan. The next one is building envelope projects, and there's no change in the building envelope. So previously, the ministry had done commissioned building envelope condition assessments. It remains in the same priority. The only difference is we've added Mount Benson back onto the list as it is a reopened school, and it goes back into the priority that was there before. Every one of these next slides has the same red writing on the bottom. Maintenance have reported some deterioration in some of these schools. The ministry's in discussion with the ministry. They've indicated that the ministry may commission a province-wide revisiting of all the building condition assessment reports. However, that's pending, and we don't know when that may happen. No timeline on that. And they've indicated that depending on the level of deterioration, the district may need to engage its own engineer and not wait for the ministry's program. So staff are currently reviewing that at a number of schools and seeing how we want to proceed. So the schools are in the following order: Mountain View, Ladysmith Intermediate, Dover Bay, John Barsby, North Oyster, Forest Park, Mount Benson. And I'm going to turn this next part over to Mike because he's been doing a significant amount of work on the SEP submissions.
Okay, so this slide shows the SEP program. This is the additional call-up that I'm calling it. These are the projects that need to be completed by March 31st, 2017, so that's a very short window. So what the ministry calls in is kind of shovel-ready. These are all projects we could do in a very quick turnaround. First one on the list is Phase 2 of the Cedar domestic water pipe. And we got funding for Phase 1. So this is the additional funding to complete that domestic water upgrade at that school. This is a building envelope project at Ladysmith Secondary. We've got some serious water ingress issues. This project doesn't fall into the building envelope program in the submission, as it's not built between, this portion of the building isn't built between 1980 and 2000. We've got some schools that need fire alarm upgrades. So there's 3 here. There's Forest Park, Gabriola, and Island Connect Ed. So combined, we've grouped these 3 projects together to meet the funding criteria for the SEP submission at about $115,000 to do all 3 schools.
Superintendent Bonnie?
If I could just interrupt, Mike, could you explain, this is something new as well, where
Sorry.
Trustee Brennan started to touch upon it, our commitment as well?
Yeah, sir, I did sort of go through that fast.
Thank you.
Starting with Ladysmith, we have, you can see down there, the district, we've proposed that we put $20,000 towards the project. Ministry does like to see districts cough up a little bit of their own money if they can. So We've put $20,000 in the pocket for this one.
Mr. Sid?
So there's two, are we in the second call?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's two calls for SEP, one for projects before March 31st, and one for projects next year from April 1 to March 2018. What we've looked at is taking portions of the AFG that the ministry announces every year and putting them towards these projects. We believe that, we've seen other districts do it last year when the ministry made announcements, and they put token amounts forward and got hundreds of thousands of dollars from the ministry. And these are projects that we would have to fund out of AFG anyway. So it's a little bit like buying some money. And it's not that the district's going to get all of these approved. So we're not going to be on the hook for all of the contributions. But it does look, it does show the ministry that we're serious about these items.
So Forest Park, that we're proposing the district contribute $15,000 from AFG towards this project. And last one is Cedar Elementary. This year, in this additional call, they've added a one-time flooring request. So we're going to take advantage of that. Flooring's typically not on the school enhancement program. It's something we do annually through AFG. So Cedar is, well, according to the FCI index, it's our worst conditioned school in the entire district that's still open. So flooring is a pretty, it's low-hanging fruit to say. This is a project we could do before March 31st and enhance the school quite significantly.
So as a reminder, the SEP funding is put in place by the ministry to continue to do elemental upgrades to schools to avoid wholesale renovations. And so they're looking for us to target systems in schools that have deteriorated, specific systems. And so we took a look at Cedar and we took a look at that building because we went through all of the FCI scores and determined, as Mike said, it was the worst condition of an open rating of an open school. We looked at the systems within Cedar and those ones that we could do that had a low rating that we could do by March 31st. And that's how that project ended up.
Trustee Ray, do you have a question?
Just a point of, yeah, I do actually. One thing that the minister told us yesterday was that what is going to happen different going forward that hasn't happened in the past is as you put all these submissions into them, they will respond and tell you yes or no and why not if no and what you need to do to move into the yes column. So anticipating that on all these submissions that we make on all the stuff you guys have done, what kind of time frame do you usually get a response from?
They've indicated,
So with this call out, we're supposed to hear by the end of September.
Oh, okay, thank you.
so there's two, the one by March 31st, they're going to say by September 30th.
Okay.
And theoretically, it's so that we can adjust the capital plan SEP submission that's due September 30th.
Thank you.
They'll come back and say,
Never a
only
dull
if you- only
moment.
if you pay 100%.
Oh, and that's where we're going next. So this next slide is the SEP submission as part of the 5-year capital plan submission. This one is limited to 5 projects. The first one is the NDSS. This is a dust collector system that's had a health and safety issue. We're proposing, same thing with SEP, we're proposing $50,000 of AFG from 17-18 would go towards funding this project.
So we have a number of dust extractor systems that don't meet current regulations. Mr. Hackwood knows the term.
Legal non-conforming.
Legal non-conforming. And so we had an engineer take a look at all of the systems. And of all the systems, he pinpointed 2 high schools. And of the 2 high schools, this one has the highest, they're over capacity in the school, and they have 1 wood shop and it's fully programmed. And so it's a utilization issue. We're going to affect more students by doing this one as a higher priority.
Park Avenue, this is the Our Places Central Boiler Plant. This is a fairly large project. Once again, we're going to contribute probably around $50,000 of 17-18 AFG. CRC, Library Services, this was demolition of the building.
So this is very interesting, I think, because the district going ahead with its own funds to demolish Harewood And ultimately receiving ministry support for that, I think may have triggered something at the ministry. Mike's, in his conversations, is hearing that the ministry is interested in hearing about buildings that require demolition that are on Crown sites. So I think they're understanding the need that in order to do something with a Crown site, you have to remove what you've done. Now, the interesting part about this is part of this 3-story CTC building is on that Crown site that we've requested be granted to the district. So we're making an attempt to, and that building is requiring to be taken down at this point. So we're going to put this in the set program first.
Trustee Solomon?
I just, where is this building? Is this the one on Selby?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Selby.
Yeah, there's 2 closed buildings on Selby and they're linked by
Gotcha.
a second floor closet.
Okay, thanks.
And second to last on the list is Hammond Bay mechanical upgrade. Now this project is linked to a carbon neutral program that will be part of the next slide that will further explain it. The mechanical upgrade is not a requirement for the carbon neutral program, but it's a benefit to the school, and it makes sense to do it at the same time as we're doing the heat exchanger. We're proposing once again to contribute a portion of a 1718 AFG. And last on the list is John Barsby Secondary. This is the roof replacement of 3 sections of roof, and it's part of the district re-roofing program. It's the next priority roof on the list. Oh, this one. This is the carbon neutral program. This is a really tough slide to read, so I'm going to skip it. So this is the Hammond Bay Elementary Heat Exchange Program. RDN have completed their outfall, the wastewater or the sewage treatment line. This project ties into that, to capture the heat and use it in a heat exchanger.
So staff have been working with the ministry for a number of years on this project. Ministry staff are well aware of the heat capture proposals from the outfall line, the sewer outfall. We've previously received support for it, but had to delay it because the RDN delayed the completion of the outfall. We've been assured now that the effluent is flowing, and so we can tap into that heat. So we believe there's a significant chance this will get approved at the ministry. So we're doing a little pre-work to make sure that we're ready to do the work for next year.
Also on the submission is a school bus replacement program. So there was 3 new buses that were ordered in June of 2016. Unclear on the actual delivery date. Transportation supervisors informed me that the replacement plan doesn't include a current request for 2016-17. These got an updated inventory, which shows the 3 new buses. According to the inventory, there's no buses needed till 2021, so as you can see.
And so what that means is the district puts in a busing request when we meet specific criteria. So our fleet is in such a condition that we believe no buses will meet that criteria until 2021. So in other words, our fleet is in good repair at this point.
Any questions?
I have 14 questions.
Yes, it's been right. I move the recommendation.
Second.
Well, thank you very much for your efforts, making schools safe for kids and trying to winkle as much money out of the ministry as you can. It's ironic, I think, that our contribution comes out of the AFG, which is actually ministry money too. So,
Anybody else? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Yeah, I believe it. So we have one more item on the agenda, barring any questions. As we're approaching 9 o'clock, we need a motion in order to continue.
I'll make a motion to continue the meeting For as long as it takes.
Hopefully not too long.
Whoa.
Don't get lonely.
We have a seconder. Trustee Robinson is all keen on spending the night here.
You got a pillow?
I'm sure Mr. Sabo will recognize the exhaustion in the audience, or in the group.
I do.
Speak rapidly.
I will and I can.
Yeah, we have a vote on the motion. All those in favor? The motion carries.
Through the chair, thank you. I was asked to give a report on essentially what we did with AFG over the summer vacation. And this slideshow was actually done for a principals meeting. And so I haven't changed it at all. I've just regurgitated it. And, so I'm going to skip over the summer operations work unless the superintendent thinks that I should touch on it, and I'll jump right to the AFG. Okay, so maybe I'll touch on the summer work. Obviously, we did custodian and clean schools, and we focused on certain programs, refinishing gym floors, filter replacements, seal and wax, AFG flooring installation, pressure washer portables, did some high dusting, did cleaning in support of school consolidation and capital projects, so we kept busy. Transportation office, we finalized the new bus routes, we assisted families in registering students to ZPass, and we coordinated cartage, a lot of cartage requirements this summer to move programs around and close schools. In the bus shop, we maintained buses and a fleet that were out of service over the summer. In cartage, we did regular cartage duties in preparing schools, getting things returned to the district, getting things back out into schools, making sure all the deliveries over the summer were put back. Summer maintenance in schools, electricians, carpenters, plumbers, everybody had testing of systems to do, and there were specific items to do, like catch up on work orders, vandalism, glass, etc., roof inspections. Painters, outside painting curbs, parking lot lines, play areas, graffiti cleanup, grounds, of course, addressing all of the other things, heating and filter replacements, and summer maintenance of some HVAC systems we can't get to in the heating season. Summer planning, of course, you saw some of the work we did in summer planning, getting ready for the submission, district catch-up on the catchment map updates, emergent AFG work, and the SEM submission for BC Hydro. A lot of work, I won't go into detail with respect to the school closure program cartage, a lot of coordination between departments, and we've got the work done as required. This work was done just prior to summer, but it's significant. It's a significant project and worth mentioning. Cedar Secondary was finished in June, and the site work was done in the summer. Wellington, just to mention it again, because there's a nice drone shot of Wellington, and that was completed in March of this year. AFG projects, which was the specific ask, there's a list of the significant AFG for 16-17. Roofing replacements, you had 3 roofing replacements, Ladysmith, North Oyster, and Forest Park. 3 of the schools we upgraded ladders to the roof, aluminum ladders to the roof, which increases safety for our staff. Strategic Energy Management, the SEMP, S-E-M-P, we SD Construction managed. We did occupancy and outdoor LED lighting upgrades. 12 buildings affected. We did the Energy Cup summary for 16-17 and program-enabled savings submission. And the total program is slated for March 31st. We didn't do it all during the summer, but we did some of it. Flooring, we did flooring, contracted a bunch of schools. Three things that were interesting we did. We're experimenting with a new vinyl floor. We used an epoxy floor in an elementary school bathroom to try and help with staining and urine smells, etc., seeping into the tile grout. And we went to carpet tile on a number of libraries. And we believe that carpet tile, the time was right to try these for the price, and they can be removable for stains and high traffic areas, etc. Coltayi boiler system, Emil spoke to that in that happened this summer. Cedar Secondary, we finished the site. Tennis courts, sand volleyball courts. A lot of sand went in, 660 metric tons, seating, viewing area, and then of course we did the fencing and cleanup of the grounds. Mount Benson, Island Connect Ed, I still get it wrong on my slides. I'm going to get it right for Patrick and the rest of the district. Island Connect Ed, we put in a cooling system in their new computer room. And we did a couple of playground relocations. We moved the life skills from Rutherford to Georgia Avenue playground, and we moved some playgrounds from Woodbank to Cedar Elementary. DAC alteration underway. We did some work in the summer cleaning out the area that will become the payroll department. Thank you, Trustee John. Getting all late. Cedar Secondary Band Room. We did a building envelope upgrade, a seismic upgrade, and a window upgrade. So these band rooms that are in the district, I believe we have 6 or 7 of them. They are now very aged and they're requiring upgrades. So we did Wellingtons under the Wellington seismic, and we have a solution for them that addresses all 3 items, and we did the same program at Ladysmith. Not easily seen as it's around back, but it's a nice upgrade. We did electrical upgrades in support of the IS. We upgraded access points, wireless access points at 34 facilities, and that facilitates Chromebook use. School enhancement projects, 3 of them, Harewood, NDSS, and Cedar plumbing upgrade. Of course, Harewood Ministry, it's actually ended up being shared funding. It was a little more than the ministry funded. And we ended up resurfacing the gymnasium. NDSS domestic water piping upgrade. We had 2 lost claims on the recirculation side of the hot water piping. And so we replaced all the recirculation lines, and just some shots of how deteriorated piping can become after 67 years. Cedar Elementary, there's a plumbing upgrade, phase 1. There's a copper taste in the system. Lines are at the end of their life. They need to be replaced in 2 standalone phases. Phase 1, which we have funding for, and phase 2, which we requested, as we explained. We did program changes. They were significant projects with respect to preparing schools for closure and program relocations. Georgia Avenue, Cedar Elementary, Mount Benson, improvements to ND, and improvements to Harewood Gym. Georgia Avenue, a couple of shots of the life skills area. Cedar Elementary converted it to K-7. Now this one was a little bit delayed due to the tender coming in significantly over, and so I think I got it back.
Ran out.
Just get into it. I lost it. I think we have a technical difficulty in the slide, and the presentation is coming to an end. I did have some nice pictures of some of those other program moves.
A lot of work.
Superintendent Blank?
Oh, just echoing what Ms. Trustee Brennan was saying, thank you guys. An incredible amount of work, and some significant moves and shifts due to amalgamations and closures and et cetera. I know, and publicly, I want to acknowledge the work of staffs all across the district. NDTA, QP, and ENSA principals and vice principals were incredibly outstanding on the way through, and did incredible work. Facilities did this undauntedly and accomplished everything we challenged them with, and it was really an amazing feat. For the board's information, also, we had 3 retired principals actually that came back and did a lot of the coordination and early work, and then stayed over the summer. They're retiring this year, worked up over the summer to help coordinate and work with the different groups. And so Jill Bailey stayed, and Susan Young worked in the schools right out front to move everything, know where everything went, move things along, and et cetera. And Marty Cross did some incredible work prior, preparing the massive amounts of lists and et cetera, because when you walk through a high school and you look at the amount of materials that are in there, everything was itemized, and we knew where it was going, and color labeled, so that when these groups went in to do the next move, it was all organized and ready to go. So I can't believe the amount of organization that occurred and the work that was done, and your staffs were incredible all the way through, and we've acknowledged them, of course, but I wanted to make sure in public they also received the acknowledgement that they deserve.
Yes, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, so I'm reminded that we have a new policy for the question period, so if the authors of the questions would like to read their question out loud, they may do so. So the first question is from Jeff Patton. Is Jeff here?
He's there.
I live in Cinnabar, and I am a home state parent for 2 international students from whose parents you make $10,000 each year. These students are assigned to John Barsby Secondary. For such premium paying clients, why aren't you providing the service their parents expect? Don't we, SD 68, want a good reputation with the agencies and parents who funnel these golden eggs to us? I'm sorry? Sure.
It's an international education piece, and we have the names and etc.
Sure. We can refer that to staff for a specific answer. The next question is from Jennifer King.
Yeah, I'll read it. So my name is Jennifer King. I used to volunteer on the school PACs at Uplands. My kids, through 3 kids going through the school system, I got to be involved for 13 years on school PAC at Uplands, so I've put my time in for sure. Worked my way up to district PAC because I wanted to actually see change. Realized it was really difficult to make change where I wanted to see it count for all students, and I volunteered on BCC PAC and was elected our provincial parent advisory council. I also took the 2-year funding that was funded through the Ministry of Education, and I have a signed certificate from Minister Shirley Bond. It was a $600,000 grant for collected voice of parents throughout the province. Really important that they wanted to hear parents, educate parents, know their responsibility and their rights towards our system of education, for publicly funded education for our students. So my question is, and by the way, my kids don't go to Barsby. My kids go to Wellington, as it was asked. Not that that makes a difference. Last year, I paid for my students to go to Dover public transit because I wanted them to take mechanics. They're back at Wellington and happy. So my question is, when did Chase River families find out that they have no bus to Barsby? When were they informed?
If you're looking for a specific date,
Could I answer that for you? Okay. Through the chair, sometime in May, I believe it was May 5th, Assistant Superintendent Tim Daly had forwarded a letter to the principal at Chase River Elementary, which had indicated bus service.
To the elementary school?
To the elementary
No,
school.
but to the
Chase
parent,
River.
but what about to the parents?
That would have been sent out to the parents with instructions to send to the parents.
Okay, because the parents here were saying they found out 2 days before school started.
Is that for Barsby or for Chase River?
It went to Chase River.
If you don't have a student in Chase River, how would you get the letter?
Just answering the question.
Okay, so the students were in Barsby, right? So my second question is, did the board consider a lateral, which was brought up great, because I, thought about this too. A phase-out decision to allow the already impacted students maintain their remaining till graduation, which I specified, at Barsby. And a reminder in here that these children, these students, are the ones who never got to say goodbye to their old school in Cedar due to the teacher strike. Not to mention that they had just lost a fellow student at that school who was hit by a flatbed truck in front of their school. And some of those students were grieving. And did not get to, have a year to grieve or anything because they were transitioned to Barsby. Just some historical reference for those who maybe are new to the board. My question to the board is, will the board consider using some of the proposed $3.5 to $4 million contingency fund as listed? I think it was in the May report. That's a big question. I don't expect it's probably going to get answered right away, but. And then the other question is, if not, is public consultation considered for Chase River catchment area, which is our biggest growing community in Nanaimo. Fastest, most houses being built. To find out from them, the people who live there have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for houses, which school is most feasible, because Cedar is actually 5.6 kilometers away from Chase River Elementary. Barsby is 4.6. The other way, you have to actually cross a highway. And those are my questions to the board. Go Bulldogs.
If we can have that back, then we'll respond.
Sure.
Refer to staff. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question is from Tiffany Ballin. Is Tiffany here?
She's here.
Is that an affirmative?
No.
I'd like to applaud whoever made the coffee tonight, because everyone still has a pulse.
Speak for yourself.
The question that I have is whether the board has considered engaging in some dialogue around addressing the unique needs of the students who have been caught in the transitional years between closures of schools. So what I heard a lot around the table this evening is, I understand there's a much broader process going on in reconstructing the transportation plan to meet current day needs, to meet current day budget realities. I'm wondering if there could be, or if it's been considered, to have a discussion about these students whose needs really are separate and unique from this overall plan. The fact that these students' needs are very temporary, trying to address it with a plan intended to operate in perpetuity seems to be very difficult. So does the board feel it's feasible to perhaps engage in a conversation about a temporary solution to a temporary problem outside of the redrafting of the overall transportation plan?
So I think the answer to that would be yes. However, I think it's important, because the transportation plan is very all-encompassing, that we sort of deal with that larger issue first, and then we can drill down and look at some of the very specifics, because a lot of it's going to be budget-driven. And in fact, before the ministry released the extra funding, we had considered cutting off some transportation routes for students within their own catchment zone. So, a lot of the transportation questions that came up this evening were for students that already have transportation within their catchment zone, but looking at outside of their catchment zone. So I think there's some bigger needs regarding transportation, but overall, I think the overall transportation plan needs to be established first, so that we're within policy, so we look at things like safety and whatnot, and then we can drill down and look at some of the other factors as well. I mean, part of it's going to be driven by cost, part of it's going to be driven by the numbers of people that are involved. I mean, obviously, if it's five families that are being affected, that's going to be more difficult than if there's 25 families, right? So I think we're willing to have those conversations. It's just that there's a sort of a stepwise process that needs to occur first.
Well, all due respect to your plan to develop your policy first. These kids need those services now. They don't need them 6 months from now or a year from now. They need them now.
Order, Chair.
Yeah. There's a process by which we
So,
ask questions.
so if I'm permitted a follow-up question.
Sure.
Do I understand correctly that until a new transportation policy is drafted and adopted in full, existing policy decisions will be guided by the existing policy? So
Correct.
as of this very moment, the board has policy
We have-
guidance on any decisions that have to be made until there is a new policy in place. Have I understood that correctly?
Correct.
So there is an existing framework for any decisions regardless of their nature at this present time?
Correct, but keep in mind, however, that something like 43% of the current riders exist outside of board policy.
Absolutely.
So the board has the choice to either live within the policy or go outside of the policy.
You actually address a very important point in looking at courtesy ridership. So I guess as a follow-up question, I'm wondering, is there an individual around this table or a committee perhaps who has at least a liaising role to hold the provincial government accountable for the fact that you folks were forced as a board into a position of sequential school closures, but because of the broadening of catchment areas that resulted, it has increased a dependency on ridership at the same time as the legislation has removed the language around mandating transportation?
Maybe, yes.
There is
Yeah, but there's no formal liaison for that. But,
Okay.
but I agree with 100% with what you're saying, because that's indeed what's happening.
Okay. I thank you for your time.
Can I just get that back so we can also respond?
Next question is from Leona Horvath.
Good evening, my name is Leona Horvath. I am the incoming PAC president at John Barsby. I also have a son, Matthew, who found it important enough to show up tonight with 6 other football players from John Barsby. I live in Cinnabar Valley. I'm a part of the coalition that tried to change the busing through BC Transit. We worked really hard on that. Due to politics, accordingly, they felt that you downloaded the fees to them. So that was their exact wording, and that's how they feel at the Transit Select Committee meeting. They would not adjust the buses. They wouldn't switch it around for us so our kids could be picked up and taken directly into town in the morning. They would not offer anything to us. Yes, Jamie Brennan, like what you're saying about transit in the select committee, Bill McKay absolutely supports us and has offered to help fund paying for buses. And quite truthfully, the impact to our community, to not just like all students of John Barsby, but these kids. My son has been up since 5:15 this morning for football practice. He takes a bus home. He gets home at about 5 o'clock at night. If that's not a safety issue right there, how exhausted he is when he's traveling through, well, he's a big boy. So, but they have to travel through Prideaux Street. So I don't know how many of you have gone there in the middle of the day and had to see the needles that I see every day when I walk by there. This is a safety issue. My question is around safety. How do you define it? The lack of lighting, the lack of sidewalks, animal corridor. Yesterday we had a bear traveling through our roads in front of my house. Walking in the pitch dark as a 13-year-old female by herself. Lack of transit service. It's an hour and 30 minutes in the morning for these kids to get to school. That is unacceptable, whether it's because a bus was cancelled or because BC Transit is playing the political game and blaming it on you. The impact happens to these kids, and there's enough of these kids that showed up here tonight to show you their passion. They go to Barsby now. A lot of them were going to Cedar. It was closed. We moved our kids to John Barsby. We did what we had to do. They're there. They're all really successful. My son has a chance for a football scholarship. He would never have that chance at Cedar School. Again, bringing it back to the safety of it, that he's been up for a long time for a young man to be up since 5:15 in the morning, to be that passionate, to want to succeed in what he does. That's what John Barsby's given him. And Cedar School's a great school. I fought too as part of John Barsby to make sure that that school wasn't closed. I fought for the bus. I was a part of that group of people that came forward and said that they deserve a bus to pick which school they want to go to. We're asking for the same thing. our kids have an opportunity at John Barsby. I was afraid to send my son there, but I sent him there, and he has excelled. He's made the honor roll. And for certain people sitting in this room who at Chase River worked with my son, they'll know that that's an amazing thing. He's been motivated at John Barsby. It's a good school for my son. Do you think I'm going to pick him up and send him to another school that doesn't have a program that motivates him? He works out 5 days a week. That coaching program that's there, bar none. And it's not that I don't want to send him to Cedar because it's out in Cedar. It's because the programming that he had there, the community that he has there, has made him a well-adjusted citizen who's going to graduate, who's going to go on to university, something that I wasn't quite sure for a while there, that my son would do it. So I just want to let you know the impact that how amazing these kids are in Cinnabar Valley. These kids are amazing. I have one young lady who came up to me last night at our transit meeting. She's 13. She gets up, she leaves her house at 20 to 7 in the morning at 13 years old in the pitch black. There is no sidewalk in front of her house. There are no street lights in front of her house. And there was a bear yesterday. If you want to talk about safety, that's the safety issue that we're looking at. It's unsafe for our kids to walk to the bus. I'm lucky in the morning I can drop my son off, and I have international students that live with me. I take them to school. But on the way home, they have to find their own way home. And that's the point that a lot of people have. Another lady was upset tonight about the safety of her kids and the fact that she's a single mom trying to support herself. Just to kind of give you a face to some of the names of the people. That young lady has lost her family. She's raising 2 boys, one who's not her own. They both go to John Barsby, they both play football, and they both have opportunities to go to university with a paid scholarship. She can't afford for them not to have that because she can't afford to pay for them to go to university. These are some of the personal impacts that are happening to us, and I apologize for everybody getting upset tonight. I truly do, because it's a room where we have our children, but the emotional levels are there, and I just want you to understand that it's not about the politics, it's about these kids, and it's about making sure that they do well in school and that they graduate. Again, I support having Cedar School reopen again. I support every community to have a high school. My whole pack supports the Cedar School reopening, and all we're asking for is the same thing that was offered to the Cedar kids, which is a bus to get them to school until they get through the system. But this is where these kids are now, and this is what they need to be able to be successful. And I want to thank you very much for your time tonight. Thanks.
The question, I think, Chair, was of safety, and perhaps we refer to that to the transportation review process.
Sure, well, it's part of the transportation review because under the current policy, there's no consideration for safety. And so this is one of the challenges that the board faces is how do we define safety? I mean, it bears the amount of distance from the roads, the darkness, busy highways, number of road crossings. I mean, there's a lot of factors that affect safety. So, and we're having staff look into that, and hopefully they'll present something that we can make a decision upon. Next question is.
Excuse me just for a moment. Yeah, so we'll need somebody else to take notes. If we could,
Oh, no, that's fine. I just said I had to add this to
excuse me as well. Can I just confer with you? On the questions? If they could just try to be specific. If you want to review that.
All right, so just for a point of clarity, I guess, because we've had a number of people get up, and the question period is supposed to be about questions, and some people are using it to make statements, and I don't know, I guess, well, I personally find that fine, but the question period is not to be used as a political forum or for furthering presentations by delegations or to deal with matters that should be dealt with through other channels. So if you could limit your questions to actual questions, and then perhaps we can either provide answers or send them on to people who can provide answers. Next series of questions is from Iris Roper. Is Iris here?
Do you need your form?
Yep, thanks.
Hello, I'm Iris Roper. Thanks for hearing us tonight. My question is a multi-part question. It's, are you aware that there are increasing numbers of international homestay students who are housed in experienced and loving homestay homes in the Cinnabar Valley, Chase River community? These students must attend schools with ESL support. They spend a fortune to come here. Their parents pay $2,000 a month. The homestay families do not get that. We get a very, very small portion of that. I'd like to know where that tuition goes. And the next part is, do you want these monies to continue to flow into our school district? These students must attend Barsby or NDSS because of the ASL support. And will you apply for the BC government grant money in order to create appropriate transportation so that our students can attend appropriate schools for their English language experience here? I personally had children in French immersion. I drove them every day. But I am now a homestay host, and I'm doing my best to provide an opportunity for these children to learn. That's what they're spending big bucks for. So.
Superintendent.
Yes, and I think I'll speak to it a little bit. And I thank the parents for bringing this issue up, because it's one that we're not aware of. And so we need an opportunity to do a review with the international programs. It's our understanding that students are placed in catchments, and they're going to the catchment schools if they need international programs. So I appreciate it being brought up, but we won't be able to answer your question until we have further time to review it, and we'll get on it right away for you.
I'd like to add one piece to that.
Yeah.
I don't, as a tax-paying citizen in Nanaimo, I want the same opportunities as every other citizen, North End, middle of town, or South End. And I understand that VIU has recently pulled all their homestay homes. They're not sending students out there because of busing. And I don't want to be penalized by no busing for these children. And they need us because they're actively marketing around the world to bring people to Nanaimo. This is dollars to Nanaimo, dollars to the school board.
As I said, we will explore it and,
Okay.
And try to answer the question as best we can.
Thank you.
Give your question back.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. No, next question, well, you're coming in faster than I can read. Next question is from William Liggett. Is William here? His question is, did you know that before Cedar was closed, there were 2 buses, one to Cedar and one to Barsby? With new government funding, why would you not offer a bus? Was debated. No, I did not know that. And I think that we discussed it around the table and decided against it.
The Barsby bus was cut about 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Was it? Next question is from, or a series of questions, is from Nana Lyle. Is Nana here? How many students are being bused to Cedar Secondary for the 2016-17 school year?
Report back.
Refer to staff. We don't have the answer to that question at this time. Is that the best use of transportation funds? We're not sure. That's what the transportation review is for. More students from Cinnabar would like to attend John Barsby Secondary and NDSS, as the school is able to provide better academic and athletic opportunities. That's a statement and a loaded one. Cedar Secondary is unable to support Cinnabar students athletically. Programs available to students is insufficient to enrich their secondary education, which is why every parent has a choice to send their school to any school they wish to choose. Next question is from, or a novel is from Nicole. Is Nicole here?
Did you say a novel?
Well, it's a full page of writing.
That's very disrespectful.
Well, I'll take the time to read it. The disruption to the school year last year by Cedar closing took a long time and a lot of work to learn to cope with. This school year, many former Cedar students have decided to stay where they are. The lack of a bus from Cinnabar has disrupted families once again and poses a huge risk to elementary and boys and girls club kids due to an increase in traffic. What were the solutions that were developed? Was the student body consulted during the time the decision to open Cedar? There is lots of room on the Extension and Chase River buses to help our Cinnabar kids get to Barsby NDSS. Set up a call for purposes from First Nations to provide bus service from Cinnabar to Barsby NDSS VIU.
Student body consent. That's the questions. Yeah. I think it's a question.
Would assume the answer would be yes. I think there was a lot of public consultation during the.
There was public consultation overall as the decision was made.
And we
Specifically,
had-
the student body may or may not have been on the.
They can take part in that consultation.
We can look that one piece up as specifics.
Sure. There's another Kaylee Bowen Nelson.
He's here.
Hi. So, I have heard that today that there are significant savings from the energy budget to the tune of over $5 million. One of the points that's been brought up on several occasions is that if busing were to be cut, the money saved would go towards additional classroom staff. My question is, would it not be possible to both continue providing busing and introduce additional classroom staff with the above-mentioned money, thus ensuring that there will be students in the classrooms to make full use of said staff?
During the budget process, which was last spring, the board created their priorities, and the operational budget is spent at a whole, and at that time it wasn't there. If the board was wishing to increase it in any way, it either comes from the ministry and other grants, which is one that was discussed at the table here, and or they take money from contingency, which is like your savings account, and spend it on that. And so you heard the debate that was discussed at the table here, and the board decided through their voting that was not something at this time that they were open to do. So that's the process. Your question around could it happen? Yes, of course it could. The board has the ability to move and shift monies as the year goes along throughout the year.
Thank you. As a quick follow-up question, if I can, would you be including all the additional cars that are now running instead of the buses in the school's footprint?
Probably not. That is a good question.
It is a good question.
Probably not.
And it's been raised
in any
before.
data.
Talia Bowell. No, there's no more.
I've been attending John Barsby School since grade 8, and I'm from Cinnabar Valley. Now that the bus has been canceled, my friends and I have been expected to ascend Cedar High School, which we have never been to before, and it has a lot less opportunities academically. I have a friend who decided to switch to Cedar, and she only went for the first week because she told me that all of her academic classes were linear programs and that there was a really poor selection of elective classes. So I'm just wondering if that's going to be improved at all. And I'm just wondering why we're having to leave John Barsby, which has such great programs and has all of our friends, to go to a school with a much smaller choice option and a lot less students.
So I think in respect to your question regarding Cedar, I think at the time Cedar was closed, it had 425 students in it, which is approximately twice as many as it has currently. It's anticipated that eventually Cedar will grow back to its original capacity and thus increasing the opportunities for the students that are there. In addition, I think there are some other advantages of smaller schools as opposed to larger schools, and that can be debated. And no one is saying that you cannot go to John Barsby, because certainly you can. The point that's at question here is whether as a board or as a school district, we have the capacity to be able to bus students one way and then the other way.
I just meant that we had that option the past 2 years to go to Barsby, and now our transportation has been taken away from us. So yes, there are carpooling options, there's taking the bus, but what about the students who don't have that option?
And that's a difficult question and something that the board is going to have to wrestle with. And I think one of the things that'll be important is to find out how many people we're talking about and what we're doing overall with our whole overall transportation. Because there's some other catchments where we're possibly considering cutting busing, and we're already talking about a catchment that has busing. So, do we take the busing away from somebody and then provide 2 busing options to somebody else? I don't know. But it's something that the board has to wrestle with. But
There is opportunities at Cedar. Pre-Cal 12.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last question, I believe, is from Jamie.
I'll make it quick. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you guys listening to us. I just had a question regarding safety, because it's been brought up a couple times tonight, and I just want a clarification. Trustee Kilmer just said a few minutes ago that they're not quite sure what safety entails and they'll have to study it. However, at the beginning presentation, with the lady here from Pleasant Valley, there was 3 trustees, including the one on the phone, all stated safety was the reason why they kept the bus on. So I don't understand the confusion. You already have that. You've already stated. Trustee Solomon, Trustee Ray, and the trustee on the phone all stated safety is the reason why. No sidewalks, bears, all that kind of stuff, why they kept the bus for Pleasant Valley. So why not the same option for Cinnabar? Because you've had all the parents just state the same thing, but then you turn around and said you don't know what safety is. When you had 3 trustees earlier in the evening say yes.
I mean, I'll speak to it from my perspective. The reason that safety wasn't important, it was the only bus provided in that area, right? There is a bus provided to the in-catchment school for the Cinnabar family still. The other issue for that was a lot of the kids would be walking down Jingle Pot Road.
Have you walked down 10th Street?
Yes,
There's no sidewalks.
I understand.
There's no lights.
But I guess the difference between the two is those were the buses that were provided to their catchment school.
It was our catchment school. You guys changed it.
I understand.
So
I mean,
it goes back to the grandfathering thing, right? And I'd be very polite and respectful. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you staying. But I just don't understand apples and oranges when it's okay for one group of kids and then the other kids that have been affected 3 different times in the last 5 years, not just by this board, but by previous boards. And I respect your rights, your right to run, and you changed it, and that's fine because I was all for Cedar. I love Cedar, and I still do. But unfortunately, my kids were made to go to Barsby, and I'm not willing to have them suffer again. And I don't understand why we're having this discussion over it's approximately $78,000 when that money can be found from the government. You had your own transportation manager state that it's there and that's what it should be used for. You've had trustees state it. We have a 5-4 split. And you've heard the fairness, you've heard everything, but I want to bring back the safety because you're contradicting yourselves in two different spots. And I don't understand. And it's not right for the superintendent and for Mr. Kilmer to say we have to study this when you guys quoted at the very beginning that that's the reason why you kept the school open. You had the PAC representative here from that school saying that that's why you kept it open. So you've already established your policy. We would just like the same treatment. We didn't ask to be changed, our catchment. It's happened twice now to my family. Three times, because when my son was in grade 7, when he went to grade 8, half the school went to Cedar, half the school went from Cinnabar went to Barsby, because it was a split. That was the first time. The second time was Cedar closing, which we did not ask for. You did not ask for because it was not your board, right? And now it's the third time. And I mean, how many can the kids take? You've got the future of our country right here staying.
Another question.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah, you're right. I'll table it for the next meeting, I will come back, I'll get on the thing. But look at these kids, look how many kids stayed. Okay, please think about that. It's pennies you're talking about in the overall thing. Take it from your chair budget. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, I appreciate your pointing out the complexity of the safety issue, because it is difficult. And I think individual trustees have their own assessment of what is unsafe and what is safe. But
Point of order, we as trustees can't get into, it could go on forever and become political.
Well, I asked the leave of the chair.
Let's stick it to the chair.
No, I asked the leave of the chair to speak. I didn't just blurt out. But I won't go any further. Just that we are, as a person who has made motions that we examine our transportation policy with an interest to defining more clearly what is safe and unsafe for children in our district, it is something we have to review. It is something we have to examine. I mean, wild animals, traffic, darkness, weather, these are all factors that contribute to unsafe conditions, and that's what we have to look at. Sorry.
Thank you. No worries.
I'm going to adjourn.
Seconder? All in favor of calling it a night?